Tony, can we first start off the interview by you providing some background information about yourself as well as your research into the topic of conspiracy theories?
Yeah, sure. Well, my analysis and research on conspiracy theories tackles conspiracy theories from the perspective of the social sciences, and that's incorporating the disciplines of sociology, political science, social psychology, and anthropology. And what I look for in those disciplines and how I apply it to the phenomenon of conspiracy theories in modern societies is, from the sociological perspective, I would look at the subgroup and the social movements behind conspiracy theories, and that's something you see prominently post-Second World War in the modern world. So you've got the JFK movement, you've obviously got the quite conspicuous 9/11 truther movement. So that's one aspect from sociology. From the anthropological perspective, I'm interested in terms of looking at cultures and tribes across the world and how conspiracy theories are endemic in all societies, just like the phenomenon of religion is and self-government. So anthropologically, there's an area of why it is that humans in social organizations always propose some form of conspiracy theory towards an alternative phenomenon. And then from the perspective of political science, it's more to do with ideologies and political philosophy. So that's obviously looking at what conspiracy theorists are trying to espouse and what their ideas are about the world, because essentially meta-conspiracy theories, if you take something like 9/11, is espousing an idea that runs contrary to the mainstream acceptance of what is liberal democracy. So that's the ideological aspect that I use to study conspiracy theories from political science. And then in social psychology, there's aspects of obviously in-groups and out-groups, how conspiracy movements position themselves against the mainstream, and then you've got the insider-outsider group. So it's almost an us versus them phenomenon. And all these spectrums across the social sciences get at groups and individuals that are trying to propose something about social reality. They're trying to get to some kind of truth, and they do this through the lens of conspiracy theory. So that's my general analysis from the social sciences, and that's the area I'm working on at the moment.
Oh, okay. And when you talk about specific ideologies, do you find that there's a sense of consistency with a lot of these different types of conspiracy theories where it's the same kinds of people that believe in one, they believe in all of them? Or are there any particular conspiracy theories that seem to have a more wider stretching aspect to the different types of people that make up the believers of those theories?
Sure, that's a great question. I would break it down into different classifications. So when you've got a meta-conspiracy theory, then you'll find that people that believe in one meta-conspiracy theory tend to propagate the others. So you've got infamous people such as Alex Jones and David Icke, who not just propose 9/11 and JFK conspiracy theories, but they're part of an overarching scheme of a conspiracy theory that usually relates to the New World Order, the Freemasons. So you do see some ideological similarities there in terms of people that propose one meta-conspiracy theory also believe another. There's also been research in what makes individuals adhere to conspiracy theories, and there's different kind of research coming out in this area. And one proposal, if you're ever interested in looking up, is a psychologist from the UK called Dr. Karen Douglas, and she was doing work on a paper entitled "It Takes One to Know One," which was basically testing whether if you adhere to a conspiracy theory, you're more likely to be conspiratorial yourself. That means that if you believe that other people are conspiratorial, you're more likely to be conspiratorial yourself. So that's one area where if you're quite cunning yourself in certain elements, you're going to be quite cynical about how other people in society operate, which is kind of a reflexive scheme, obviously, of how you see the world. So obviously you might be quite cynical, so you believe other people in society are quite cynical. In terms of 9/11, though, specifically, this is a much broader domain, and it has many social facets to it. And one of them in particular is the spread of information on the internet. I mean, the JFK conspiracy is still one of the most famous of all time, but only after 40 years where it keeps gathering momentum. The 9/11 one shot up straight away, mainly due in part because of the internet, and that's a specific kind of conspiracy theory for two reasons. One one of it's because it's obviously fresh in the minds of everyone. It's only been 10 years ago. It also coincides with other areas of international unrest in terms of the Iraq War and also the internet propagation. So that is one area where you don't have to be a believer of other conspiracy theories to believe this conspiracy theory, and that's one reason why it's gotten such a mainstream appeal. And that's obviously why you've got architects and engineers and academics in this area who also believe in a conspiratorial activity. So to a certain extent, if you believe in one conspiracy, yes, you might believe in another, but there are different types of conspiracies.
Okay. Now, there's a lot we can talk about with regard to conspiracy theories and even about 9/11 conspiracy theories, but there are certain things that you have written about that really drew my attention. So we'll talk about sort of specific aspects to how conspiracy theories are sort of designed and comprised. So let's first of all talk about, you had mentioned conspiracy theories, and we'll use the 9/11 conspiracy theory as sort of an example, but feel free to bring up others, to kind of make your point. They make an illogical connection from how something goes down to who caused it to go down.
Sure, that's an interesting area. I mean, one of my areas of research is obviously philosophy of social sciences, so I'm looking at the role of theory in explaining social phenomena. And there are many theories that you can use to explain social phenomena because it's inevitably more complex than the natural phenomena. So what you've got here is the engineers, and primarily they're using evidence from what is an essential engineering and a science realm, and they're applying that to a theory in the social world, and there's a discordance there and a leap from one aspect to the other. So on the one hand, you could demonstrate to me that the towers were brought down by demolition. That is an engineering view of the buildings coming down, but it says nothing about the agents responsible for this. So on the one hand, you can argue that the building was brought down by demolition, but on the other hand, you can't use that argument at the same time to propose who was behind this in terms of social structures and social agents. And from what I've seen in this area, there is no evidence that it was an inside job by the government. So that's one area where the engineers are basically trying to use their skills in the engineering area and applying it to social philosophy.
Okay, and talk about how testability and empirical causality, such as the demolition in this context, in the physical world does not necessarily overlap with causality in the social world. I know it sort of touches upon what you said, but can you extrapolate on that a little bit?
Sure. It goes back to the point where we're dealing with two domains of investigation, and in the natural sciences, where if you're taking engineering and causality, it's slightly more clear-cut to understand and test. You have a control variable and you test it, and that issues causality. So in this area, we've got those that argue that the building was brought down by demolition. We've got a cause and we've got an effect there. Now, taking that into the social world and saying that the cause of that demolition was caused by social agents is a completely different realm of argument. So causality in terms of the social agents responsible for it does not equate to the causality of the building being demolished. So it's basically two realms of investigation, and that's where the causality becomes erroneous, because you can tell me what caused the building to be demolished, but you couldn't tell me who caused this in terms of social agents behind this.
So it seems to me that something that can be somewhat effective in when they make arguments is they can get very specific on physical evidence, such as how the buildings came down, and then sort of try to connect it with very circumstantial evidence about what might have caused the building or who might have been behind the buildings coming down. Is that right?
That's completely right. I mean, we mentioned this briefly in the communication. Previously, from what I've seen, there is no evidence pointing to an inside job from the government. And logically, if you were going to use the social data, you could say that the buildings that were demolished could have been by other agents that were trying to set up the government to look like they were conspiring against their own people. So it is this mismatch between causality and theories in the engineering world, and kind of trying to take that into the development of the social and political world, and that's where you get this concordance.
Yeah, and I thought that that was really kind of a kind of a brilliant statement that you just said, and you had written about before about how it literally the evidence behind the government being behind it is so circumstantial, and you're I mean totally cherry picking on these anomalous types of things that happened that you could easily make the case that another organization could have easily done the same thing to set up the government. I thought that was